Good morning. I had a really interesting chat today with ChatGPT, so I figured I'd start something called Chat with ChatGPT. I saw a post about Sergeant Jose Barco, Barco, and especially after the last one I posted like this, I figured let's do a little more digging. Sergeant Barco so I asked ChatGPT, can you tell me about Sergeant Jose Barco? Here's what he had to say. Sergeant Jose Barco is a U.S. Army veteran, a decorated U.S. Army veteran whose life has taken a complex and tragic turn. Born in Venezuela to Cuban parents, Barco moved to the United States at the age of 4 and grew up as a lawful permanent resident. He served 2 tours in Iraq, earning a Purple Heart after sustaining a traumatic brain injury during combat. Despite his service, Barco's path has been fraught with challenges. In 2009, Barco was convicted of attempted murder after shooting an innocent. In 2009, Barco was convicted of attempted murder after a shooting incident at a house party in Colorado Springs, where a pregnant woman was injured. He was sentenced to 52 years in prison, but was paroled after 15 years for good behavior, during which he taught English and mathematics to fellow inmates. Upon his release in January 2025, Barco was immediately detained by Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, due to his non-citizen status and criminal record. Efforts to deport him to Venezuela were unsuccessful as Venezuelan authorities refused to accept him, questioning the authenticity of his documents. This has left Barco in a state of limbo, detained in the U.S. with no clear path forward. Barco's case highlights the complexities surrounding immigration, military service, and the criminal justice system, raising questions about the treatment of non-citizen veterans and support available to them. So I asked ChatGPT, was he detained under the Trump administration? Because they said January 2025, and most of January was still under the Biden administration. So I wanted to be clear before I went ahead and posted. What did Chat say? Chat said, yes, Sergeant Jose Barco was detained by the U.S. ICE under the Trump administration. He was taken into custody on January 21st, 2025. A U.S. service member, 2 tours in Iraq, Purple Heart, detained January 21st, day 1 of the Trump administration, day 1 of this ICE operation. Day 1 of this ICE operation, they detained a U.S. veteran. Day 1. That sounded suspicious to me. Let me continue reading. He was taken from custody on January 21st, 2025, immediately upon his release from prison, which occurred just 1 day after President Donald Trump began his second term in office. The timing aligned with the administration's intensified immigration enforcement efforts, which prioritized the detention and deportation of non-citizens with criminal records. Barco, a decorated U.S. Army veteran. I'll say that again. Barco, a decorated U.S. Army veteran who served 2 tours in Iraq and received a Purple Heart, had completed a 15-year prison sentence for a 2009 attempted murder conviction. Despite his long-standing residency in the U.S. since the age of 4 and his military service, his non-citizen status made him subject to deportation proceedings. Following the detention, ICE attempted to deport Barco to Venezuela. However, Venezuelan authorities refused to accept him, citing concerns over the authenticity of his birth certificate and questioning his ties to the country. As a result, Barco was returned to the U.S. and remains in ICE custody, facing uncertain future. Barco's case has drawn attention to the complexities and challenges faced upon non-citizen veterans, particularly those with criminal records under stringent immigration enforcement policies. Again, January 21st, 2025, so I said, or I asked, was he considered a day one priority by ICE? Yes, Sergeant Jose Barco was considered a high priority target for deportation under the Trump administration's immigration enforcement policies. Again, a veteran who served this country. On January 21st, 2025, just one day after President Trump began his second term, Barco was released from prison after serving a 15-year sentence for a 2009 attempted murder conviction. Immediately upon his release, he was detained by ICE agents. This action aligned with the administration's intensified focus on removing non-citizens with criminal records. The administration's executive orders, signed on January 20th, 2025, expanded ICE's authority and prioritized the enforcement of final orders of removal, especially for individuals with criminal convictions. Barco, again, a decorated U.S. Army veteran who served 2 tours in Iraq and received a Purple Heart, has been a lawful permanent resident since childhood. Despite his military service, his criminal conviction had made him a subject to deportation under the Trump administration's policies. After his detention, ICE attempted to deport Barco to Venezuela. However, Venezuela authorities refused to accept him, questioning the authenticity of the documents. As a result, he remains in ICE custody, facing an uncertain future. That was my conversation chatting with ChatGPT. If you want more, follow me.